I'm Eric Savitz with Forbes, and I'm here at Economy talking to Rick Smolan, the journalist and photographer. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, sure, it's good to be here.
So, Rick, you've got a new project that's just about you're giving birth to.
Yeah, it feels like that.
I bet it does. Tell us a little bit about the new project, the book, which is at the heart of it, and then some of the other related pieces.
Sure. So I probably have the best job in the world. Every 18 months or so I get to invite my heroes and my friends and some young photographers and send them around the world in these sort of Mission Impossible assignments. And
now, you've just to kind of set the background here, you've done this multiple times. What were the last couple of books that you did?
What I love to do is to find sort of interesting topics, very often emerging topics, like the first year the internet was starting to touch people's lives, or the global water crisis. We did a book called The Blue Planet Run a few years ago it didn't sound like a topic that lent itself to National Geographic style photography.
I still have it sitting on my shelf.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And so this last 18 months, we've been looking at this topic of big data. And I go to TED and I go to All Things Digital. I go to a lot of conferences, like Techonomy. And I'm a journalist. I couldn't program my way out of a paper bag. But when I hear all my friends talking about something like big data, I started asking questions. And so I said, okay, every other sentence seemed to have this word big data in it. So I asked people to define what it was to me, because I just wasn't getting it. It sounded like one of those kind of fluffy marketing terms that people were using to sell something. And one person I spoke to said, it's so much data it doesn't fit on your personal computer. I said, okay, it doesn't sound that interesting. And then someone else said, no, it's like taking a database from one organization, a database from another, and overlapping them. And then you see these patterns in the data. And again, it sounds like a better way to sell, sweaters or something.
Right.
And then I ran into Marissa Meyer at All Things Digital. And I was asking her, because she's one of the smartest people I've ever met. She's a good friend. And I said, can you tell me what this big data thing is? And she was the first one that actually sort of sparked my curiosity. She said, big data is like watching the planet develop a nervous system. That all of a sudden, for the first time in the history of our species, we have the ability to measure things all over the planet, process that information, and then respond to it while it's still happening.
Well, what's so interesting to me about this is that when you think about big data, what people tend to think of are big servers and database farms, and they're not thinking visually. They're thinking about,
the hardware.
There's a retailer, and he's collected, millions of transactions, and he has all this information. And as you say, he can make it easier, to buy sweaters. Right? But that doesn't seem like a visual project. And of course, this, like other projects, is a visual project. And you've produced a lovely. I haven't a chance. To look at it's this beautiful book on the human face of big data.
Yeah.
It feels like you're so on top of this trend, because it's really just at the beginning, even from a technology perspective, of really seeing widespread adoption of these, big data techniques. How are you seeing? Give us a few examples of some of the things that you found, and that your team found as you were looking at how this impacts humanity.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces to this. The whole thing feels like a big inkblot test, because it is so many things. Depending on what industry and who you talk to, they all kind of see it themselves reflected in this new world. There's so many stories I love in the book. There's one about a 27-year-old scientist named Sweetak Patel. He's a MacArthur Fellow. He started 3 companies. And he said, imagine if you got your American Express card tomorrow, and there was no itemization. None of us would ever pay a credit card bill with no itemization, because I really spend the money, right? But he said every month we get an electrical bill, and we have the faintest idea what it is we're spending money on. All we know is it's higher every month. We all say turn the heat down. That's kind of, except in the summer, turn the air conditioning down. So he invented this little chip. He plugs anywhere in your house, and it recognizes the digital signature of every appliance in your house. Right, so he actually can tell you what your television set versus your hair dryer versus your washing machine uses. That's interesting, and it's kind of cool. But I said, is there something that you learned that surprised you? Something that the average American or average person in the world wouldn't know about? And he said, yeah, we found out that the average American spends 11% of their monthly electrical bill on their DVR. That little box spinning away.
On their DVR? It's like a tenth of your.
Yeah, because the hard drive just sits there and spins away. It wasn't designed in most cases to spin down. So I thought that, wow, instead of drilling another oil well or building another nuclear power plant, you could lower America's energy
shutting
bill,
your DVR
just
off?
shutting it off or redesigning the damn
Right.
thing. I mean, like, duh. Now you might say, well, that's not big data. That's a tiny amount of data. But if you do it across all of the world,
Right.
that's a huge. If you could save 5% of all the world's energy, that's pretty dramatic. There's another interesting story. There's so many examples in this book that sort of take your breath away, and you go, oh my God, that's so interesting. There's a guy that discovered that 1% of all the patients in New Jersey are responsible for 33% of the annual healthcare costs. He just looked at the data.
Wow.
Every time these people were showing up at 2 in the morning, they put them through the same battery of tests. And there's one woman who showed up 50 times in the ER in the middle of the night. She ran up a $757,000 bill in 1 year. And he said, why don't we make house calls on these people?
Right.
And they started doing it, and that woman's never been back once to the ER. I mean, right now, we're spending 20% of our national GDP on healthcare. It's insane. And if you look at the projections, it's going sort of straight up.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things about the book that I think are a little unusual. So this is a very large, heavy,
heavy,
glossy, lovely photograph.
Coffee table book. That's
coffee
what we
table
call
book. But it's not quite as expensive as I might have guessed. I mean, this is an expensive book to produce. Talk a little bit about how can people buy the book.
Sure.
And you have an arrangement with Amazon.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, EMC was our main sponsor on this. They gave us complete carte blanche to do the book. They've never seen it. In fact, I'm about to present the first copy to Joe Tucci and Jeremy Burton. So they've given us the ability to create this book, which I hope is going to spark a global conversation about big data. Someone said, why are you doing this? What's the point? And the point is, right now, governments and corporations are spending a lot of time thinking about big data.
Right.
And I think that we as individuals need to be thinking about it too, because it's our data. Like, who owns the data about us? Why is it that everyone's profiting off of all the information we're generating except us? So EMC allowed us to go out and do this incredible project, and it's completely editorially independent. Cisco is our second sponsor, and Cisco is funding a TV documentary we're working on right now that'll be broadcast next spring. And then the thing that I'm really excited about, in addition to actually having created this book, is I had this fantasy of how do you spark a global conversation. So I went to Rob Carter at FedEx, who's the acting CEO, and I asked him if they would consider delivering this book as a gift to 10,000 world leaders, Fortune 500 CEOs, heads of media companies, Olympic winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, on one day, on December 4th. And to my astonishment, they said yes.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, as somebody, as a journalist, as an author, you want someone, I'm really trying to get this in the hands of people. So, Amazon is selling this book. It's actually being published. It's available in bookstores starting in about 2 weeks. But what I love is it's a $50 book, but you can get it at Amazon for $29, including delivery if you have this Prime service, which again, that's fantastic.
Right, it's about what it costs for a hardcover novel.
Well, if I wanted to FedEx this book, it would cost me $30 to FedEx it. So the book's kind of free.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting. And I think that even people that don't think they're interested in this world, I think that big data is going to have a bigger effect on all of our lives, on our children and our parents, than the internet has. And that's saying a lot.
So I want to ask one last thing. So you also have there's an app.
Yes.
Tell us about the app and where can people get it?
Okay, so there's an iPad app coming out the same day as the book, and it's going to cost $2.99. We're donating all the funds to Charity Water, a wonderful charity that's providing fresh drinking water to people in the developing world. And embedded in this book is a very cool app. It's a free app that you download. It's called the Human Face of Big Data Viewer. And throughout this book, there are about 25 videos. In other words, you point your smartphone or your tablet at one of these pages. It has a little key in it. On the back of the book, it shows a little key right here. And whenever you see that, you just point our app at it and it launches a YouTube video.
So this is different than, say, like a QR code where you've got kind of an
ugly thing in the page.
Set of symbols. You essentially, the app recognizes the photograph in the book, sees the photograph.
It would recognize, and what's so cool about it is there's a company called Erasma that makes this product, and it's a really fascinating app. It's actually used, a lot of people using it for augmented reality, where the little things pop up and dance around the screen.
So even if you had the same images and they were on the web, or they were
if it was in Forbes, or if it was on the web, you can point our viewer at that photo. It actually learns the photograph. It's not an embedded code. It's not embedded in the photograph. It learns the pattern of that particular picture. It's really cool, and it's sort of taking this 500-year-old medium of the book and then connecting it in a really cool way to the web. So there's TED Talks in here. There's a whole sort of host of really. So you learn about somebody or one of the stories in the book. You point your smartphone at it, and all of a sudden there's a story of somebody telling you more about it.
That's great. Rick, thanks so much, and good luck with the project.
Great, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Right.